Okay, what is up, what is up, what is up? Welcome to another video tutorial. This one is the crash course in the Nimzo-Indian. Let's get right into it. Let's flip this board around so you guys can see it from Black's point of view. So we've got d4, knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, and the move bishop to b4. And with this move, Black intends to pin the knight on c3 early with the intention of preventing e4 and possibly saddling white with doubled c-pawns and an isolated a-pawn. In exchange, Black gives up the bishop pair and must be careful to keep the position close to best utilize the knights and keep the white bishops from raking across the board. And the white has several replies to this bishop to b4 move, including e3, knight to f3, bishop to g5, queen c2, a3, and others. But any attempt by white to remove the pin or prevent the doubling of pawns is going to result in a further loss of time. And Black is ready to castle already, which means that white is going to be under duress to castle quickly, to prioritize castling, and which means that Black is going to have more time to decide on the pawn structure and pile pressure on the critical e4 square. Whoops. So for example, let's say in this line after queen to c2 and castles, a3, bishop takes and queen takes. One of the values of the Nimzo has been taken away in that there's no longer the prospect of the double pawns. But in this line, you can play knight to e4, and on queen to c2, you can even play f5, further pressuring the e4 square. And white is just simply not developed properly on the king side, which means that he's going to have to get motoring pretty quickly. And it's going to be very difficult for him to make the critical breaking move on e4 with his pawn. Another possibility is in this position after a3, bishop takes, pawn takes, and castles. Once again, we see that Black has a safe king, has not made any committal moves with their pawns in the center, so Black still has a lot of options as far as how to choose the pawn structure, but white is clearly under duress to castle, as white now white is under duress to castle, as Black is castled and ready to launch an attack and a middle game plan. Without the ability to play e4, it's quite difficult for white to break the position open, meaning it will be hard for white to unleash the power of the double bishops, which is one of the advantages for white of the Nimzo-Indian. Black wants to keep the position locked up by setting the pawn structure and continuing to put a vice on the e4 square right here. If white is able to play e4, it's usually under difficult circumstances or very late in the middle game, after a lot of pieces have been exchanged. By then, there's little value to breaking the position open, as there's no pieces behind the pawns to launch an attack. Black often castles early, plays c5 and d5, and possibly plants a knight on e4. In some lines, Black may also play b6 and bishop to a6 or b7. b7 for the purpose of continuing to pile pressure on the e4 square, and a6 for the possibility of exchanging a set of bishops. I believe that's called the Fisher line. If white plays queen to c2 and a3 to avoid the double pawns, Black often castles and plays knight e4, gaining time to launch an attack since white's king is still in the middle of the board. Sometimes f5 is played in these lines to further cramp the e4 square, as we saw in the previous line. The Nimzo-Indian is a safe and solid reply to the queen's pawn opening. Black delays making any aggressive pawn moves in the center, offering flexibility. The Nimzo allows for a simple middle game plan of preventing white from playing e4 and keeping the position closed to make use of Black's knights. Black castles quickly and generally has a safe king well into the game. This opening can also be used to transpose into Queen's Gambit decline lines, and if you like this style of opening, you may also be interested in the Cambridge Springs as Black, which I'll do a video of at a later point in time. The downsides of the Nimzo-Indian are the large number of responses at Black's disposal, which is the case in any flexible opening, and also the loss of the bishop pair. Black should be mindful of the pawn structure and the remaining pawns as the endgame approaches, because knights are much clunkier at moving around in an endgame. They're not ideally suited for preventing pawns from racing up the board. Now, the line that I'm going to recommend is as follows. Let's start a new analysis. if you can get into this line, this is what I would recommend as a starting point for the Nimzo. We have d4, knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, bishop to b4, e3, black castles, forcing white to prioritize castling. So bishop to d3, d5, knight to f3, c5, castles, and here black can play d takes c4 first, bishop takes, c takes d4, e takes, and b6. Now before I go any further, the reason why you might want to play a line like this is, number one, you've removed white's e-pawn, permanently removing the problem of the e4 break for white. Number two, you've isolated white's d-pawn. And the reason for the move b6 is you're intending to play bishop to b7, and then you're gonna plant a knight on the d5 square, and you're just gonna blockade white's position. And because the way the pawns are set up is very difficult for white to create an imbalance or any sudden or shocking change to the pawn structure. And sometimes in these lines, black will even play a6 and b5, and it's just gonna be very difficult for white to crack the position open. You notice that black has a safe king and a very simple and easy plan. It's not clear how white is going to make full use of these two bishops. So black has a very safe position. Instead, in this line, instead of knight to f3, white chooses the line of knight to e2. Then here in this line, we're still going to play the move c5, and let's say, for example, in this line, we play c takes d5, c takes d4, pawn takes, and castles. We're going to end up with a sort of a similar line. And probably here black can play knight to c6. And you notice that this knight on e2, it doesn't exert the same kind of pressure on the center that it would have on f3. For example, it's not easy to get access to the e5 square, and it's stuck in a defensive duty, taking care of this d-pawn, and it's still not clear how white is going to utilize their so-called advantage of the double bishop pair. It's a blockaded pawn structure in the center, and the pawns are symmetrical. Black is a perfectly comfortable and safe position. If white plays anything at any point in time which confuses you, simply remember your main objectives. Black wants to prevent white from playing a pawn to e4 and keep the pawns locked. Any move which you think would best accomplish these goals is what you want to play. Sometimes the move is a direct attack on the e4 square. Sometimes it's to pin or exchange the knight on c3. And sometimes it's an exchange on d4 to remove the e-pawn completely. With experience, you'll get to feel more comfortable and get a better sense of which particular moves will be best to achieve your goals. So that's my super crash course in the Nimzo. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Please click the follow button, and we'll catch you next time. I'm the Trout. Take care.